Hello everyone. Welcome to the fourth in a series of conversations at St Mary's addressing the issues that are impacting on the teaching profession. My name is Peter Finn. I'm the head of the institution, which has been educating teachers for 121 years. Today I'm joined by three members of the Irish National Teachers Organisation, the INTO, Mario Shea, Rachel Poland and Paul Groogan. Now I'm particularly proud that Mary, Rachel and Paul are former students of St Mary's, and each of them served in the role of Student Union President after their graduations. So welcome the three of you to your alma mater. We know that times are very challenging for the teaching profession in indeed many parts of the world, but particularly so in our society, which suffers from ongoing political and indeed financial uncertainty. We are informed that the profession is challenged by issues such as relatively low pay rates, poor resourcing, low morale, exhausted leadership and limited opportunities for funded teacher professional learning. And yet our economy and society needs high quality educational provision to provide the kind of employment and lifestyle opportunities that our citizens deserve. School teachers are recognised as the drivers of education, but are they sufficiently valued? That's our question for today. Do we really value the teaching profession? And to start the conversation off, we have a presentation from Mario Shea, which draws on her recent experience of undertaking the role of the INTO Northern Chairperson. So over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be back in St Mary's today and with colleagues and friends who have been here with me too. And I suppose just to set the context, I'm normally a teaching principal in West Fermanagh in St John the Baptist Primary School, Roscoe, and I've taken a year out of school into a seconded post in the office as the chairperson. But I suppose my background, I come from a long line of community activists. My mum and dad were very much promoting community development in rural areas, and certainly led in the field of youth work as well, and I have background with trade union officials too, so it instilled in me from a very early age to get involved in my local community and be part of what happens in a local community. And I suppose in rural West Fermanagh we didn't have many reaching out to us to help us to do anything. There were also some belief amongst many that the roads end at the Ballygolly roundabout. So you can imagine my need to be fairly self-sufficient or to shout out loud and clear that we needed some help when something had to be done, and I learned to do that fairly early on. And certainly with a grandfather like mine, Francis Henry Smith, who had a background in the Railway Workers Union in both Fermanagh and Dublin, sitting quietly by wasn't really something that was in my DNA. Peter alluded to the fact that I was part of the Students' Union in St Mary's, and my grandfather was really proud of the fact that I took on this role in the year after my graduation, and was really enthusiastic for me to run for this position, because he told me that it's really important that the voice of a worker is heard no matter what the work is, and certainly that students heard their voices heard as well, and that dialogue and communication was really the only way to solve problems. Stubborn silences didn't solve anything. So he went on to tell me as well that when someone doesn't feel that they can raise their voice to be heard, that those of us who can and need to speak for the collective, and strength of numbers in any conversation gives the opportunity to move the discussions forward. So it was wise words like this that led me to work in INTO, a legacy borne out by many within our organisation, and certainly I have two here beside me today that have come that road as well. And we stand on the shoulders of giants. It's the people who went before us, the area reps that I knew as a young teacher, the Northern Committee members that I spoke to, the officials that worked in the office for us, all added to where we are, and that legacy continues today. And that's why we've worked this year as well to develop a youth committee and to find ways with the colleges of education to find more opportunities to work with our young and future teachers so that they can find their voices as well and be part of the collective moving into the future. So it is for me this year, a great delight to speak for the 7,000 strong members we have in INTO in the north, but also as the collective voice of 50,000 members across the entire island of Ireland, because we are the only All-Ireland union that we have working here in the north as well. So the role of chairperson for Northern Committee has not been without challenges this year. I don't think the battles are over for us yet. But I was prepared for the role by other colleagues who spoke to me about the importance of engaging with the different authorities and education partners that we have, and certainly the vast majority of that this year has been in the world of Zoom or Teams. And really, as people and as practitioners in the field of education, nothing really beats the opportunities that we have to engage with each other in the real world, and we certainly saw that at Northern Conference this year. No matter how creative you are, the virtual world does not have the same impact we want or need to experience, either as teachers or for the pupils that we are teaching. This was made very clear to all teachers as they turned their way of teaching around whilst in the throes of a lockdown world. But when children and families were delighted to return to the real classrooms, remember as well, so too were the teachers. I caveat that statement within the context that we all know schools never closed. School buildings may have been closed on occasions, although that became rarer too, but teachers kept on working. In most cases, they provided for key worker and vulnerable children, and they worked alongside year groups and individual children, families and the wider school communities to address the learning and pastoral needs of all their pupils in a remote learning environment. This is not diminished, it continues today. The experiences that children faced throughout this period were differing, and there were many contributing factors to this, because there was the issue around the level of computer equipment available across the system and the delays in sourcing this for support to schools. We had to consider the skill base of the teachers who had little or no additional professional development in this area over the last 5 years. And then we had to add into the mix the Wi-Fi capabilities within rural areas, because nothing was easy about remote learning. Sometimes too it was the knowledge on how best to use the materials which were sent home or were uploaded to digital platforms, or the links that were sent for use at home. The stresses and the issues that this caused cannot be ignored either at school level or in the homes. And we're dealing with the legacy of this in our classrooms each day. But teachers were resilient and creative, and they found solutions to overcome the difficulties and to provide the support where it was needed. If the pandemic can be recognised for anything positive, I hope that it has shone a light on the value of teachers as educators in our society. I read recently an article in the Irish Examiner of a dad's reflection and acknowledgement of the role of teachers in his children's lives, and he said, "People rightly talk about nurses going above and beyond, and that it's a vocation as well as a job. But I think, particularly in primary school, there's been an element of vocation there as well, and that they are just doing something more than just turning up for work for the day. And during a pandemic, they're basically making people, good people if it all pans out, and the world is a better place because of teachers. It's not an easy job. It takes skill and dedication and a huge amount of heart. It shows the strength of teachers who stepped up in the midst of the storm and brought calm to the chaos that children and families were facing. And teachers continue to deliver that message that we can do this to everyone in the school communities that they serve. When the dark clouds come, keep going. When the big things feel out of control, focus on what you love right under your nose." These are quotes from the book The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. And it was a book that I used quite a lot with my school community in newsletters that I sent out, and illustrations and wise words that spoke to me during the time of the pandemic, and something I chose to share with the school community. Because the circumstances of the pandemic challenged me as a school leader, challenged me to stop and reflect on what was important in those moments. The storm raged around us, but we kept going. At no time did the teachers down tools. They never worked harder, and teachers continue to do so under immense pressure. But we are human too. We get sick as well, and there's only so much that can be done. Staff absences and illness coupled with substitute teacher shortages put pressure on everyone. We want our employers to acknowledge this and put the necessary resources in place to support us in our hour of need. We don't want to return to remote learning, but we will if we have to, and especially if it needs to be done to keep everyone safe. We're not in recovery yet. COVID is still there to be dealt with. The integrity of teachers and their dedication to their profession is to be celebrated and commended. Excellence has shone through. We have done things we never thought possible. The broken education system kept going because teachers made it happen. It's what we do. But don't assume that we will continue to do it. There comes a limit for everyone, and many teachers are reaching that point if they haven't already passed it. Angry teachers are not afraid to let their voices be heard and will be saying loud and clear, "We have had enough." But voices of all ages and levels within schools will be heard. This year, through the establishment of our principal and deputy principal forum groups across the districts, INTO brought the voice of school leaders to the fore as well. This was further supported by a working group engagement with practitioners as part of the review of workload impact on school leaders. This is a review which sits within 9 reviews, which will in time bring improvements to the terms and conditions of all teachers within the system now and in future generations. The current working practices of school leaders have been an ever-growing concern over the last number of years and has certainly been exacerbated in the last 2 years as school leaders managed the outworkings of leading a school through a worldwide pandemic. In contrast to working time initiatives for teaching and other staff, school leaders have open-ended contracts that sets no limit on working hours. The situation has become dangerous with principals and vice principals expected to be on call constantly. The demands being made on school leaders beyond school hours has increased significantly and compound the workload issues. INTO need to investigate this further, and we're going to work towards getting a clearer picture of what the workload drivers are behind this situation. Because school leaders feel that over time, significant responsibilities have been passed to schools from employing authorities without corresponding increases to the resources available for schools. There's too much work and too few resources, and for school leaders, the current position is not sustainable. There's also an increasing risk of this leadership crisis in our schools because the role of school leader is becoming increasingly unattractive. Many teachers were unwilling to take on the extra responsibilities of promoted posts, which impacts many school leaders' workloads, as they are having to fulfil multiple roles and take on further additional work. Recruitment of high-quality school leaders and retention of experienced school leaders are increasingly significant issues across all sectors. Much more needs to be done by employing authorities to support these vital roles, and we need to do something to resolve these issues very soon, because the pressures are immense and the workload is phenomenal. There have as well been a number of events I attended this year which caused me to pause, reflect and challenge myself as I move forward. One occasion was the Vera Foster lecture this year given by Dr. Caitlin Donnelly of Queen's University Belfast. And it's where Dr. Donnelly asked us to consider a series of questions. What is a good school? What is it that we value in education? How can we move forward as we move into what we hope is a post-COVID world? These are fundamental questions not only for us as practitioners, but that the Department of Education and the education employing authorities and other support agencies need to consider too, because we cannot do it alone. We also cannot do it without a credible plan for recovery in education. We need to see a complete overhaul in the economic structures in wider society, and with particular emphasis on education, so that school leaders and school teams can create the schools we want and that our children deserve. Trust us, we know what needs to be done. Listen to our voices because we have ideas of value to share. Trust us because we know what we are doing. We know the choices that need to be made. Don't micromanage us and tie our hands in decision making. We don't take the responsibility that we have in fiscal matters lightly. Trust us. We know that in order to have the best people in the best jobs, providing the best for our pupils, that we need the best funding and investment available to us. As we move towards a new mandate for government here, we need a programme of government which highlights this. We need buy-in from all parties. Don't make education a political football. Schools need to know that they are a priority. We need increased funding to address the major challenges and inequalities we face in the legacy of the pandemic, but also to redress the decades of underfunding which we have come through. We need careful, planned for, multi-year budgets so that we can get the best for our school communities. These are brave steps forward. Our voices need to be heard. We have opportunities ahead of us that we need to take hold of, because there is no going back. We speak for our collective, for the education community. In unity we find strength. Ní neart go cur le céile.
Right, thank you very much for that, Mary. My initial response is that it was a very comprehensive presentation across very many issues, getting down to the grassroots, to the teachers in the primary schools and the vocation you spoke about, but then addressing the political issues that need to be dealt with in the future, particularly around funding. I'm very impressed about the scale of this INTO organisation. You know, you refer to 7,000 members in the north and 50,000 members across the island of Ireland. That's a very, very powerful voice. And you also spoke really eloquently about legacy, about the fact that you're an old organisation. You have deep roots from which you're drawing your future, so to speak. So the first thought I have in terms of opening up a conversation about a whole raft of issues is indeed about the INTO as an organisation and growing from the bottom. And you made reference to a youth committee which is engaging with student teachers, and that's obviously of big interest to me because I mean I would really want our student teachers to be in a trade union and to be informed from that perspective. So I'm going to turn now to Rachel, if you don't mind. I know that you're involved in this youth committee, and I know that you are actively involved in engaging with student teachers to bring them into the organisation early and to, in a sense, induct them into the values of the INTO. So could you tell us something about the work of that committee, your own personal commitment to that, and how are young people responding, Rachel, to this?
Absolutely, Peter. So the INTO Youth Committee is something that we've established this year. As part of my role, I am currently working as the INTO Intern for the year, and so I'm seconded from my teaching post in St Joseph's Carnacaval in Newcastle. So it's been an excellent year and involving student members. So we started off, as we traditionally do, at Student Freshers Fair. I've connected with Clodagh Martin in St Mary's Student Union as Student Union President, and who is an excellent Student Union President and a credit to St Mary's and a credit to the students. And Clodagh has been fantastic. We've worked together very well this year in creating student webinars for the St Mary's students. We held one on the hidden curriculum just recently. 2 weeks ago, Mary herself was also involved in that. We held one on teacher wellbeing and out and teaching practice, how you can look after yourselves. That was face to face in St Mary's. So that's been very important, to be involved with the students and to encourage them, you know, the importance of a trade union. Why be part of a trade union? And it's not as we maybe think as we start off in our teaching, oh, you only need them when maybe you're in trouble or something's gone wrong. That's not what the INTO is about, and that's not what trade unionism is about. But as part of the youth committee, what we've been doing is working together with younger teachers to have the younger voice heard within the teaching profession, because the INTO do represent all members, but especially our younger members are. We're hoping to have them more represented within the INTO. And that is happening. We have a youth conference coming up this year. We've held 2 very successful youth conferences in the north, one in 2019 and then one last year during COVID was online. So this year we have a youth conference coming on the 20th of May and 21st of May. The theme of that conference is empowerment. So the idea is to empower our teachers in their classrooms, to empower them within their schools, to have those conversations with the leadership, but also to empower them within the trade union, within the INTO, empower them to attend branch meetings, have their voice heard. We are very important, as are all members very important, but it's about having our young teachers heard and the issues that are pertinent to young teachers, having those heard. So a good idea, or a good thing that came up at the youth committee, was we had conversations about what issues impact younger teachers. So we had those conversations around the table, and there were things that, you know, when you decide to undertake professional development through a master's degree or things like that, the fact that it's of your own, on your own back and your own cost, and you fund that. So that was brought up at youth committee, and we therefore brought that towards Northern Conference this year. And what we have asked for the INTO is to investigate the possibility of having some type of financial remuneration for that, in that encouraging, you know, we do it for our own professional development, but we're also doing it for the development of the children in our class, you know, and we want to, you know, use what we learn through our masters in our classrooms. That's of course why we do that. So therefore we're asking that something is given back to teachers when they do that.
Could I make just one intervention at this stage?
Absolutely.
You know that over time, I suppose society changes and the people within society change. So you will have older members and these are the new members. And I'm very conscious that we're in a period of rapid change in society generally. Have you picked up amongst the new members, or indeed those who are going to be entering the teaching profession, how they see the role maybe different than that was seen 20, 30 years ago? Are there matters that are of particular interest to the younger members of staff or the future teachers, given the fact that, as I say, society is constantly changing and in a sense we're all moulded by a changing society?
Absolutely. I think society has changed and the role of a teacher has changed in the past. You know, I've been teaching, this would have been my 7th year, so I have 6 years behind me, and even since I started teaching, things have changed drastically. I suppose COVID changed the way we all taught and the use of ICT within the classroom, and I suppose the level of workload now on teachers is immense. And I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, maybe my colleagues, I don't know.
My day it was definitely very busy.
But, you know, it has drastically impacted. It's not nor did I think it was a 9 to 3 job when I entered the profession. But the fact is, it is not a 9 to 3 job, and it is things that you're taking. You're constantly thinking about the children when you return home. It's an 8 to 5, 8 to 6. Come home, make your dinner, and then you're back on, you know, and that's something that we really need to look at within the teaching profession, and younger teachers have raised that, and that the burnout is becoming 6th year into your teaching, you're already feeling that burnout, you know, and we have to think, well, we want our teachers to last and we want to retain our teachers, so change is needed.
Yeah, I think I would say to you that there are more and more demands on teachers. There are more and more demands on student teachers. Our door is constantly being knocked by people who want to promote this and this and this and this, and the solution to every problem in society appears to be teaching and the schools. So you just keep top of that there. Well, I'm going to turn to Paul, if you don't mind, Paul, on a particular matter. I listened with intensity when Mary said during the pandemic, or during the period in which the schools were affected by it directly, schools never closed. And that's a very powerful statement. And it's a very powerful statement about the teachers within those schools. So are you in a position in terms of your engagement with those teachers to tell us something about that comment, schools never closed, and what it meant for teachers?
Well, basically what it meant is, you know, the schools never closed because the teachers kept working. The teachers were involved, and first of all, whenever the lockdown came along, it was suddenly, you know, everybody at the school had to close. But teachers started by preparing packs and preparing work for all the children that they knew, because they're going to be left at home. So they had to deal with that first and foremost, and then came after that was, you know, the vulnerable and the key worker children. The decision being by the government that we need to look after those to allow the society to keep working. So then teachers were then, where do we go to? As you say, where do we go to? We go to the teachers. So the teachers then were asked to, you know, move forward and to you know, go and look after these key worker children and vulnerable children in the school. And on top of that there, you've got to remember as well that, you know, then the decision was made, you know, where do we go from here? Remote learning has to come in. So, and you always got to remember the skills that we were talking earlier about, the skills of teachers, and you were mentioning, I mean, the skills of teachers, some will be very proficient at that remote learning and computer work. And a lot of teachers don't have that background and wouldn't have it. So there was an upskilling that had to be done there, which a lot of teachers, you know, moved forward and did courses in a very short period of time to upskill themselves, to provide, always been there for the children, always been putting themselves forward. And I think that's, you know, the issue is the schools never closed. Teachers kept working. They're still doing it. Yep. They're catching up on trying to bring those children that missed all that work and, you know, bring them forward. They've upskilled themselves when they weren't paid for none of it at the same time. That they might have done courses, they might have went online. They gave hours over and above their normal hours. And on top of that, they also looked after their own families and children and tried to teach them at the same time. So I mean, society as a whole, I think, look at teachers and think they take them for granted. They think they're we take them for granted. The value, as you were saying about the whole point about valuing teachers, I think society forgets about nurses. It's like nursing as well. They forget about how good and how much we need them until something like this comes along. And at the end of the day, I have dealt with lots of teachers and lots of pressures they've been dealing with, and you know what? They just kept getting on with. They did what they had to do. They were there when they were needed, and they stood up and they were counted. And
Paul, you would have dealt with many of those teachers during the course of that. And I'm going to come back to the comments you made about valuing. But in terms of the teachers that you have dealt with themselves, do you think do they feel recognised? Do you feel that they feel valued in terms of the work that they do? And if they don't, how does it impact on them?
Well, I mean, I would give you an example of a lot of queries I've been getting, Peter.
Yes.
And a lot of queries I'm getting, I mean, from young teachers, and I consider young teachers, and I'm a bit older than them, obviously, but young teachers, I'm looking at teachers who are looking at variation of contracts, which is, they're looking at the workload they're dealing with and wanting to reduce their workload. That's the pressures of home and work coming together, which they've gone through. They've got the issues of the, this workload that they're being given and they've been brought on top of them all the time has impacted their well-being. And there's a lot of issues of well-being there that we're not going to see the impact of for a few years yet. But it's sickness, it's well-being, it's the issues regarding variation of work. And we've brought on recently, as a union trying to deal with all that, we've been brought forward things like our time budgets that we introduced there a couple of years ago. Yeah. Well, this will give the teachers the opportunity to look at their workload and try and deal with it. Now, it's rolling out there, but it's still not getting to where it needs to be. But the pandemic and the COVID and the amount of work that teachers have done is indicated definitely this is the way we need to go forward, and teachers need to bring this, to sign up to this and to get it in place so that they can manage their life. Because there's too much of that, taken for granted. To say, the job they do, they're there, they'll do it. And I remember a comment made by a politician a few years ago. It was not in public, but it was basically referring to all the teachers will just get on with it. And that unfortunately is the attitude of the politicians that we're dealing with at the minute, trying to get a pay deal for teachers. How do you value teachers? You value them by show them value, appreciation every day, which principals do on a regular basis. But you've got to value them in other ways too, and that's financially as well. You've got to pay them for doing the job, for the profession they do.
Well, as you can imagine, that interests me a lot, because one of the key functions that I would have to take on board in my role is to recruit young people into the teaching profession. And that's not helped by relatively poor pay. Mm-hmm. And it's not helped if young people have an impression that they're not valued as teachers. That's a very dangerous move. And we are very lucky in the north of Ireland here, and indeed on the island of Ireland generally, that we have a really top-class teaching workforce. Mm-hmm. And that's relative to other countries. It's quite simply don't. But don't take that for granted, would be my view. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to Mara here on something. Good teachers will always reflect. It's part of the profession, the reflective practitioner. But in the course of your presentation, you did say that what happened during the pandemic forced you to stop and think, which is really reflect on what's really important. I'd be keen to draw you out a little bit on that reflection, either as a teacher, leader in a school, or as a union official, or both, as the case might be. You reflected by stopping and saying what's really important. So what is really important from your perspective?
I think from a school leader point of view, certainly, and because I'm a teaching principal, first and foremost, I was worried about the children in my class and making sure that they had everything that they needed during the time off, and not just from a teaching and learning point of view, but that they had the emotional support and they had whatever was going on in the family unit, that we could support that from school side as well. So I did stand in people's gardens and connect devices to Wi-Fi codes and sort things out, and did online Zoom individual calls to children and families, and took the tears and the tantrums from parents and children at times to try to resolve issues as well, because you know, everybody was dealing with the crisis and everybody was trying to just find their way through it. And there were occasions I said to mummies, put the books in the bags and take them out on the bikes and spend the afternoon in the garden or whatever. You're not going to gain anything if you're going to be fighting over a reading book today. So it was about being measured in what we could deal with at the time, because that's what families needed. And I was also very conscious too of my staff and knowing the commitment that Paul says that they made, you know, and learning to teach in a new world, in a new environment, on a new format, being accessible to families because of these digital formats 24/7, and being very clear to the staff. You have a cut-off time here too. You know, if you were in school, you'd be lifting your bag and going out at 4:30, whatever, then you need to shut down your connections online as well. You need to be mindful of yourself and what you're doing, because if you have to come back online tomorrow morning, you need to be in the right place to do that, the same as you would if you were in your classroom. And that was difficult because people were very conscientious and they felt, it's, you know, our phones and our devices are very alive to us at times, and it's very hard to ignore a ping coming in or a red circle coming on the side of an app to know that there's messages sitting there. So it was just trying to get people to evaluate that for themselves, because to have a happy staff, to have a productive staff, I needed to know that they were rested as well with that. So very much the children and the staff, and that has carried through with me into the union this year, because like that I'm probably dealing with a greater volume of calls than I would have previous to this in my role in Northern Committee. And I'm getting a lot of calls from principals sent through to me. And I think because they know I know where they're coming from and I understand some of the pressures they're under, I can have a different sort of a conversation with them. And equally so, when I'm speaking to members, I can say to them, you know, take the step back. Where is this coming from? What are you being asked to do? Can you say no? Here's how to go in and have the conversation if you're feeling that this is overloading you or this is difficult to you. And go give them kind of angles to go in to have conversations that are hopefully will be more beneficial to them in the long run, because, you know, we have to look after each other. We have to look after the people in the system, because if more and more people walk away from the profession, it's just going to put additional pressures on those that remain in the profession and add to the pressures that will come on those coming in the bottom end, because there's an expectation of the young teachers coming in are young, enthusiastic, have new ideas, going to contribute this. It'll help those that are in the system a wee while to step back a wee bit. But we need to see the balance in all of it, because the experience that we have in well-established teachers nurtures the young teachers coming through. They need to know that they have those teacher tutors there working with them and kind of guiding them through the system. And, you know, Paul's completely right. The directed time budget is the key to a lot of this. It's the key to principals stopping asking staff to do things. It's the key to the staff saying, sorry, I can't do that unless you take something off my workload. And it's also the key to those initiatives that you mentioned come through your door. They come through the door of the schools as well. Yeah. And, you know, whilst you have to think, oh, that might be good for our group, that might bring benefits to it, but we're already involved in this. Can I shelve it until next year, or can I stop something else to bring that in? You can't keep adding and adding and adding without taking something off somewhere down the line.
Yeah. Recently I've been writing with certain organisations and simply saying, we're now into initiative overload, and we really have to stop and think. Yeah. Now, one of the big challenges that we hear about in the news, Rachel, is the challenge of the provision of special educational needs. And it's a continuous issue. And the focus is largely on the pupils who are not receiving the special educational needs that they are entitled to. But the angle I'd like you to consider is the impact of that failure to provide the special educational needs on the teachers who are quite literally left, metaphorically, holding the baby, because the child doesn't go away, the child is still there, the pupil still has the special educational needs, and you've got a teaching workforce who are trying to deal with this matter. And sometimes I don't think the teachers get enough recognition of their role in providing what they can when they know that the needs need to be addressed somewhere else. So can you talk to us what you know about now, about how teachers are finding the challenge of a circumstance where we just don't have sufficient provision for special educational needs.
Absolutely. And it's a case that the support isn't there, and you have these children in front of you in a class and they need support. So who does that fall on? It falls on the class teacher, it falls on the SENCO within the school and the principal within the school leadership team. And that just creates, again, we reflect on workload, and it creates the workload within the classroom, and you want to do your very best for that child, and you want to help them succeed in any way that you can. So inevitably the pressure is on you as a class teacher to help that child and help them learn and succeed in any which way they can. And that's where it's disappointing, when you know a child needs help and you have 5, 6, 7 children plus in some classes on the special education needs register, and there's only so much your limitations have. You have a classroom assistant possibly who should be one-to-one with one child, and that child absolutely deserves and needs that help. But there are other children requiring help from these classroom assistants and from yourself, and it's, as a class teacher, you're divided and split in, 17, 20, 30, pieces each time. And it can be very challenging in the classroom. And again, if I reflect on my own practice, it's myself going home, looking online, what can I do? How can I support these children? Obviously using the people within your school, your SENCO, and asking them for support. But really, the bottom line lies with the EA and other departments who should be providing that support, and that's what we need, and we need our teachers to be trained in special education needs, but time needs to be afforded to that. And again, reflects on the same thing Paul and Mary has said about directed time budget. That is the answer. If we can have specific time set aside for training in regards to special education needs, which will change, every class is different, every child is different, so we need development and professional development in every school, and every teacher needs that. It's not suffice to say that you had it at university level, which you do, of course, but you come out and you could be teaching 10, 20, 30 years after, and society, as we've already discussed, changes so much. The needs of children change so much. So we need to be trained properly and appropriately in regards to how to manage these children, and it does become difficult within a classroom to manage that, because we want to do our best. And I think, Mary, you've said it, we try and we do, and we try and fix a broken system because we want to, we want to help the children.
I tried to, I remember one time dealing with a child that I had to deal with, and there was 5 or 6, on the register in the classroom, and I sat one day thinking, I need to talk to that child on my own for 10 minutes. That's but a 10-minute teaching time a day, and I had a class of 30, and I worked it out with simple maths. Hopefully I'm right here. 30 children, 10 minutes a day, that's the day gone. 10 minutes each. So I give them just 10 minutes each. And if you think of trying to support a child in SEN in the school, and how you use a teacher in a one-to-one, which is what most of them need, how do you give that time and how do you give that support? You need the support from outside to come in to help the teacher.
Because the expectation of parents is that if their child is identified as having a need, that there's something going to be done about that. And the system just doesn't back schools up in being able to support that at the minute. And the demands are growing because more and more responsibility is devolving back to the school, and less and less actual hands-on support is coming to schools. We're getting to the stage now where some of the agencies that we would normally have had a timetable slot with, they're coming in an advisory capacity, giving us links to documents and whatever else, and then we have to go away and build the plan ourselves at school side for all of that. So, there's a mismatch of what the expectation is of the system and of the parents, and what the schools can actually in reality do without adding substantially to the workload of all the staff within the school.
It strikes me this brings in the issue of substitute teachers, and I know there was a resolution discussed at your conference in Enniskillen about this. So taking Rachel's point that that in-house training, the in-school training takes time, and you have to get away from the class to do it. So that reads substitute cover. And then your own point in terms of, Paul, dealing directly with pupils and the time involved in that also involves the need for substitute cover. So I'll turn to Mary in your role, your lead role in the INTO. I know that resolution was put forward, but tell us a little bit more about the INTO's position on the situation with regard to substitute teachers, who I think are now a vital element of the education system.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, schools can't exist without substitute teacher support along the way. And certainly the Engage programme has brought a lot of the day-to-day substitutes out of the system into schools to manage and support that programme moving forward, which is great because it's putting more bodies into schools. But it still doesn't negate the fact that we have day-to-day incidental need for substitute teachers. And as a principal who has sat and rang 20 odd people on Lister to try to get somebody to come into the school, and ended up not going on the course myself because I just couldn't find the replacement. That's a day-to-day issue for teachers, and it's compounded at the minute because of the level of staff absence due to COVID. And, you know, that's making it more and more difficult. But I'm involved in a working group that's looking at the restructuring of Lister and trying to make it a more user-friendly system for schools, but also for the substitute teachers themselves. But we're also looking at, within the reviews of education, substitute teachers, and improving the terms and conditions for them as teachers as well, because, you know, they are the go-to people. They could be in a class of a P3 class today, and tomorrow they could be called to a school to be in a P7 class. They're having to cover the breadth of what goes on in schools at very short notice and keep themselves upskilled, and they could be in a school in Fermanagh and a school in Tyrone the next day, and wherever they get called to, they have to be willing to go and travel and do all of that. So INTO are very mindful of all of that and are very, very much working in the background to try to improve what goes on for substitute teachers, but also having conversations with the department and the higher education groups as well to see, you know, how can we promote and keep our young teachers from moving overseas even for a short period of time, keep them in the system here, keep them that this is an attractive place to stay and that they get opportunities. And we've had conversations too about, you know, the system in Scotland, that when they graduate, there's a guaranteed year, the year after graduation, that there should be warrant for us to develop something like that here in Northern Ireland as well. But it's finding the right people to have those conversations that are willing to fund that, and that's the key to it. It's investing in that, investing in young teachers moving forward, and knowing that when we have the outgoing at the other end of the system, we need to ensure we have the quality coming in at the bottom end as well, and that they feel valued within that.
Well, it's a fact of life here in St Mary's that at the end of 4 years in the case of B.Ed students and 1 year for PGCE students, they automatically seek employment in the likes of Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar. And the answer is very simple. Why did they do it? Because there's better terms and conditions. So until that is addressed, the young person who's taken out a loan to be here for 4 years, or if you're a PGCE student, including the loans beforehand, they have loans to pay back. That's the new system of funding higher education. And they have a choice between a highly paid job in that part of the world and good terms and conditions, or hang about here. Well, they're making the choice. So that has to be addressed. Now that brings me to, at the moment we have this independent review of education undergoing with a panel who are involved in various consultations, etc. And it arose from the New Decade, New Approach political agreement. So Paul, I'm going to say to you, I'm certainly of the view that the role of teachers in the education system has to be at the core of that. And a key issue is pay. Now, if I were to say to you, let's imagine for one moment I'm a member of that review panel, and I say to you, Paul, what is the case for better pay for teachers? Because it's all right saying teachers should be paid more, but you need a business case for that, or you need a case. So what is the case from the INTO perspective for paying teachers better?
Well, I think the first thing you look at is the recent COVID, the ongoing COVID pandemic that is there. I mean, look at what teachers did. Look at how they were valued from that. I mean, you know, the amount of work that they were involved in. The schools never closing. They were always there, you know, and upskilling themselves, doing what needed to be done for the good of the children around them. So, I mean, it's a vocation in the first place. There's no doubt about that. But it's a profession. And people forget it as a profession. I mean, all of us are teachers here. We went to college. We did our 3, 4, 5, whatever years we did to get the degrees that we got to become a professional teacher. And any other profession that you look at. And I actually did a speech in this at a conference a few years ago, and And I researched it. I actually looked up and researched. Now, I can't remember the figures then because it was a few years ago, but what I was the point I was making was a lawyer goes to university and does so many years for a degree. Doctors go, they do so many years degree. You know, every architect, whatever profession it is, they go, they serve their time, they go to university, they get their graduation, and they go out into the wide open world and work. But they're professionals and they're paid when they go out at a professional rate of pay. Yeah. Teachers are the worst paid profession in the society. And as I say, the COVID has highlighted the amount of work teachers do and the value that they have in society. I mean, the point even with remote learning, teachers they say that face-to-face is very, very important. You know, the fact that is necessary, that teachers have to be there face-to-face to teach these children. We need these teachers. We need them out in society. We need them to help, rear our children and bring our children up and point them in the right direction in the world. So we're not being valued. I think this COVID has pointed that we should be valued more. As a trade union, we're always looking. A trade union is about improving terms and conditions for teachers. Yeah. That's our job. Trade unionism has brought 5-day working weeks, paid leave, paid sick leave, paid holiday, paid maternity. That's why we have these. That's why people at weekends can go and relax and enjoy themselves, because of trade unions. So trade unions have a role in society, and my job is to improve the terms and conditions of my members. And teachers deserve that. And I know that because I'm dealing with queries of day in, day out, with all the things they involve with. But I know the job they do on the ground with my own children that they've done, and all my friends and all. And I've been part of it myself. I've been there. It's a vocation, but it is a profession. They've deserved to get paid for what they do, and that's what I promote. We're actually running a pay campaign at the minute with NITC to raise that factor. The last offer given from the department was a disaster offer. It was a terrible offer. There wasn't value in the teachers. So we're now actually going out on a pay campaign with Northern Ireland Teachers Council to go forward to raise this coming up in the May elections, to get politicians to support this. The teachers need to be valued. Pay them the money they deserve.
Well, that's full stop. And certainly this institution would fully back that there. But maybe one thought that I have on this is that you referred to the profession, but let's perhaps look at a role analysis of a teacher in a clinical and in a very research-informed way, and identify the numerous roles performed and the intellectual and behavioural requirements to undertake those roles, and compare that with other professions. And I think at that point you very quickly realise that the role analysis of the role of a teacher equates to those that are paid much higher in society. And perhaps just a little maybe hint in your direction along this idea of role analysis, and present that role analysis to those who have to decide what level of pay teachers get. But I'm going to keep moving on here. We've talked about teachers a lot, and that's very, very important. But we also have school leaders. We have people in the schools whose responsibility it is to keep the show on the road, first of all, and to make the school a community and ensure that every single pupil in that school is benefiting from the teaching. So, Mary, you made reference to a review of workload impact on school leaders. Could I ask you to comment on that? And then I'll bring in Rachel and Paul again on their views on the current state of school leadership.
Well, this review is a review that started probably about 18 months ago. It actually started kind of pre-COVID times, the conversation started. And we were very careful when we spoke to school leaders, because we brought out practitioner groups from post-primary, primary, special and nursery, and had distinct conversations with them for what was relevant to their sectors. And we were very careful to say to them, don't hedge it on what's COVID. Talk to us about what the workload was like pre-COVID, because COVID brought another dimension to it anyway. Because these were issues there were many issues that were there long before the COVID situation arose. And it is that whole idea that you are available 24/7 in your school community. You can't go down the street to buy a loaf of bread, but a parent stops you to have a wee chat about Jack today and just this wee thing that happened, and I don't want to make a fuss, but it starts something that needs to be done. as a teaching principal, I go into my classroom and I teach, and I come out at 3 o'clock and I see the kids home, and I go to the office and I deal with whatever letters, whatever emails, whatever phone calls, whatever forms have come from the department, from the education authority, whatever has come from the psychology service, a form that needs to be filled for a child. Because no matter what other roles I have within the school, of a SENC or whatever, eventually the paperwork lands back on my desk as a school leader for the final sign-off. You're doing the preparation for governor meetings that happen late in the evening because you're dealing with volunteers who have their own work and their own commitments, and you have to work around those time parameters too. So it's resolving things like that for school leaders that, my working day can go on to 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to stop that from happening,
No.
other than me saying, that's not working for me, I can't do that. But the mechanism is not there for school leaders to stop that. So it's dealing with issues like that. It's dealing with the issues of, when I became principal 17 years ago, we had a fantastic programme of support from organisations like RTU and from the EA doing initiation for school leaders. And that has now diminished or disappeared completely. So you now have a wave of school leaders coming through with no support structures there, or not significant support structures there, other than the network of colleagues they have maybe around them. And you're seeing more and more young principals reaching out. Most schools have gone into a cluster of school principals in their area that we have initiated ourselves as school leaders. It wasn't something that was set up for us. We just saw the need and reached out to each other and created that network. And at the minute, it is as simple as a WhatsApp group or a Facebook page, and it means you get the answers to the questions you need there and then, rather than trying to be on the phone to some of the management authorities where you get pushed from pillar to post and you still don't get a straight answer, and you just need to know what you need to do in the next half hour. And, it's the networks around you that you get that information from. And that has been prior to COVID, but most certainly through the COVID period.
Rachel earlier on identified herself as a young teacher. You've been teaching for 6 or 7 years. And I listened, and I take a little note here as to what Mary said in her presentation. The role of school leader is becoming increasingly unattractive. So tell me this, upfront and honest, would you fancy doing the job of a school leader as laid out there by Mary?
Peter, if you asked me this when I graduated from St Mary's, absolutely. Those were my intentions and my ambitions. And the more I learn, the more principals I get to know through my role in the INTO. I'm realising that it's not an attractive role because of the workload, because of the amount you're asked to do, what rests on your shoulders, that I would actually be quite content in my teaching role, having the parameters that Mary discussed as principals don't have. Teachers work their 1, 2, 6, 5 hours. If they choose to work more, they do that in a capacity that they volunteer to work more. But I enjoy having that in my teaching life, and it creates a work-life balance that I can achieve and I hope to achieve. But to be a principal, I'm not sure. It's something that definitely I would like to do, but at the current state it's in, at the current listening to other principals, it doesn't seem, and that's disappointing, because it is something, as I started as a teacher, and that's always something you want to do. Of course you want to progress in your career and move forward to these leadership roles. I think I'll use an example in school, taking on a coordination role. Absolutely, it's something you want to do, but it can be a very difficult role when the time isn't afforded to it, the money isn't afforded to it. So accepting that responsibility can be difficult, and you think, well, if I'm happy, I'm teaching my class, my children are happy, that's enough for me, and it's not as attractive. So that's where change is needed, and hopefully with the reviews it will become a more attractive role, and a role that we do have people that want to do it, and a role that's enjoyable, because that's why we're in the profession as well. We all want to, well, I know I do love teaching, but I wouldn't want to take more responsibility to not love it as much as I do.
Well, Paul, isn't that very disappointing? Now, you have somebody coming out of initial teacher education full of ambition, which is a great thing. I am 100% behind people having ambition, should it be in sport or in work or whatever, but essentially having that ambition knocked out of them as they begin to realise what's in front of them. So I'll turn to you then. And with no disrespect, at the other end, let's say, of the continuum of involvement in the teaching profession, what's your view on this? I'm being told there is a real crisis now out in the system of replacing principals who have taken early retirement, and some of the management authorities are saying, where are we going to get the new principals? So that's over to yourself.
Well, thank you very much for that, Peter. Listen, I mean, I deal with principals' queries and all the time too, and we're dealing with them. And you know, I have experienced this. My wife is a principal, was a principal, but she's not anymore. And I've seen the effect of the job on her. I've seen what it's done to her. Now, one of the hardest jobs I think is a teaching principal in a small school. And you know, I have my own personal opinions on it, and because I've experienced that, you know. I mean, I on an INTO basis, on the, you know, as looking at it as an organisation, you know, the support's not there for principals. They're not getting the support. They're people. I'm getting principals who may be calling me, contacting me, looking for support, and they're asking for, you know, help with something, and I'm saying, yeah, I can give you advice, but I can't, you know, I can't fully indemnify you because you have to talk to your employer. They need that support from their employers, and that's lacking. There's no doubt about that. Let's put another thing on the table here. I mean, they're principals of a school. Teaching and learning is their job. But they're dealing with budgets. They're dealing with money. They're dealing with those HR things that they shouldn't be dealing with. And you know, and we have there's a motion went through the conference actually recently, or the last conference they're dealing with, talking about looking at LMS, looking at the budget, because principals don't need that extra workload. If you had principals do their job by teaching and learning and looking after the staff and delivering the teaching and learning to pupils, that's the key. You know, and that's where the independent review of education needs to look at things as well. You know, that will take pressure off principals to a large extent. They don't need to be dealing with a lot of those things. You know, and there are the bigger schools that we know who have got managers who run that sort of thing for them, which is really maybe the way to go down the line, but that's personally an opinion of mine on that. But you know, it is difficult for principals because they're teachers. They're fundamentally teachers. They come out as teachers. They didn't come out as principals. They might have went on and did a PQH to further their you know, reach their experiences to be able to become a principal. But they're fundamentally teachers, and if they're left to do that job in their school, to do teaching and learning and focus on the children, focus on teaching and learning, and not put all other stuff on top of it, which builds up the pressure. You know, as a trade union, what are we doing about it? Well, you know, the reviews that we've negotiated in the last pay and workload agreement is to look at teaching principals and VPs' role and the fact they don't have a cut-off point. They don't have 1, 2, 6, 5 hours. Yeah. They don't have that in their contract. They have to be available all the time. And seriously, Peter, I think over the last 2 years, the COVID has just burnt a lot of people out. They never stopped. And I never stopped. I know what it's like. I was again through summers there that we all were involved, everybody involved in it, had to work through it. So it's to try and attract people to the job. I don't even think increasing their pay of a higher level of a principal will attract them to the role. It's very difficult. And the problem is too, is the teachers watching that, looking inside, watching that happening, are just going, I don't want to do that job.
Your points are really well made, Paul. And you emphasise the term principal is actually principal teacher.
Yes.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
And the principal of the school is the leader of learning and teaching. But I think we would all agree that the modern day principal is doing a lot of other things, and unfortunately if they don't deal with, for example, HR matters, things get worse. If they don't address a lot of time on financial planning, things get worse. So it's a fundamental problem there when the role is meant to be the principal, teacher and leader of education, but the actual task on the ground are something else. We're coming towards a conclusion, and I'm going to give you each of you a good warning shot here. I'm going to ask each of you to consider, in the light of what I said at the start, that this conversation, and indeed our teacher profession project, is really about elevating the issues that need to be talked about, studied, addressed, and indeed sometimes researched in relation to the teaching profession. So I'm going to ask each of you to name the one, that's very difficult, I appreciate, one issue that you think you would like to conclude on this during this conversation, which will go out to thousands and thousands of people on the various social media networks that we work on. So if you could think of one issue, and it may well be something that's been addressed already, it doesn't have to be something new. But as you're sitting here saying, and we're saying to ourselves, what are the big issues impacting on teacher profession, the teaching profession in the north of Ireland? You tell me the one that's closest to your heart, the one that you would say, this is the one that I would really want to progress as quickly as possible and with the greatest vigour. So, not unsurprisingly, those who went first will continue to go first. So, Mary, let's hear the one big issue that you'd like to bring to the attention of those who are listening to this conversation.
I think it's probably to do with teacher workload and addressing, you know, people work hard, they do a good job with what they're doing, but there's too much expected of them with too few resources to back them up. And I think that in order for us to resolve the majority of issues for teachers in school and school leaders is to address the workload that's expected of them. Right,
that's your one. Paul, you're next.
Oh God, thanks. The last one I mentioned there, that, you know, the issue regards to the teaching principle. I mean, I think that, you know, if we look at if the Independent Review of Education does anything, look at that and focus on that, because let the principals do their role to do with teaching and learning, and take that all the other workload that they have away from them, and you'll see that's they'll do. You know, that's what they'll focus on. The children are come first. Teaching and learning is what it's all about.
Super. And Rachel?
I think I'd like to add that I want to work on the retention of teachers within the profession. You know, our younger teachers coming out, we've decided to enter the profession because we want to be teachers, possibly principals, and let's look at how we can retain those teachers. So that is encompassing everything. It's paying them fairly and appropriately. It's ensuring their work-life balance is achievable, therefore their workload is not immense and phenomenal as it is. So it's looking at the retention of teachers and how we can retain young teachers who will obviously progress and encourage younger teachers to come into the profession.
Thank you. Very succinct in each case. I'll conclude by saying that St Mary's University College is a committed advocate for the teaching profession. Obviously, that's our main business. But we work with schools continuously in terms of placement learning. We work with the trade unions in terms of many issues as well. So the whole purpose of the Teaching Profession Project is to raise the profile around these issues and to provide opportunities to get the message out using the new social media. But I have to say, this is a little bit of indulging in St Mary's, that I am massively impressed by the three of you. In terms of your graduates of this institution, and that means I'm very proud of you. But the insight, the knowledge, the perspective, the experience that you have brought to this particular seminar is really impressive from my point of view. And we will make sure that this gets out and about, out through the schools, government, society, and the really powerful messages that have been communicated through the medium of our conversation today are disseminated very widely. And if people who are in positions of authority within education are wise, they will listen and they will act. So thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.